It's weird how our brains work. You can tell me how to do a thing, give me all the steps to follow, and I will understand you and understand the steps completely, but I won't be able to do it to save my life. I'll nod along, grasping what you're saying, but I won't be able to apply it. If, instead of telling me how and giving me the steps, you give me the context surrounding the thing, you tell me, here's this interesting pattern, and here's a place where you can see that pattern in action, then I'll be able to do that thing right away. Only then will I finally get it. For that reason, I've always loved literature, movies, and mythology. From the very beginning, I didn't just read or watch them. I used them not as fiction, but as real manuals for how to do stuff, how to be a good person or live meaningfully. I always have. Pretty quickly, when I was a kid, fiction became this magical mentor and guide of mine that I could reach for in the dark. Absent of any kind of advice or instruction on how to live that made any kind of sense to me growing up, I had to go looking for it. I don't know about you, but around the age of 13 or 14, I looked around at my family, assessed my immediate situation, and realized I really need some help here. So I started spending more time away from home. I started staying up late. Soon a bona fide night owl was born. I would stay up after everyone in the house was asleep, bring my pillow and this yellow and orange Afghan into the wood-paneled living room where we were never allowed to eat, and watch the late movies undisturbed by the perfectionism and pressures of a dysfunctional family life. As sort of a survival mechanism, I started reading everything in order to immerse myself in other, messier, more exciting yet more comforting worlds. Later, at age 15, I started drinking a lot, but that's a different essay, not this one. So back to age 13 to 14. I had to switch the big cabinet-style television over to UHF to get to the channel that showed old movies. They'd start at 11 p.m. and go on for hours. You had to cross the room to set everything up and get on that right channel, and then you'd settle down. No swiping or opening apps or answering messages, no digital chaos, just you alone in a room where the daytime pressures and stressors had faded into the dark, with the warm lives of vibrant people sharing themselves on screen. And during that particular season on that channel, there must have been some sort of Barbra Streisand retrospective going on. Barbara became my mentor. She was perfect for that, because all of her early characters shared this loud irreverence and sort of matter-of-factness that just ultimately said, take me or leave me. I'm different from you, and I'm really okay with that. She didn't shield me from the shame and blame around me, but she emboldened me to see it as part of a pattern and stay funny. She let me know that the world didn't need to be comfortable. It could fit weirdly and stiffly, and you'd be okay. At the same time, while my parents had little advice for me, they were voracious readers. Our brick ranch-style house had built-in shelves in the wood-paneled living room, and those shelves plus the Caps Daniels drugstore were my source of books. One of my early influences was a little book of short stories from that shelf by Lee Smith called Me and My Baby View the Eclipse. My parents' own manual for life was a big fat newspaper out of Raleigh called the News and Observer, which they read religiously every day and which told them what to like and talk about and read. And the reviewers there regularly pushed all the Southern fiction writers coming out of UNC and Duke, so the shelves were full of those. About Lee Smith, the News and Observer was right. She became another mentor of mine through the pages of her stories. She taught me what I needed to know as far as I could tell, that there's magic in regular life, that even the cheap folding lawn chairs out in the backyard could be a thing of beauty in the right context. I don't know if I came to this intellectual conclusion exactly, but I know that somewhere in my being I absorbed this truth, that just the way you frame a thing, the more everyday and ordinary the better. The way you look at it will christen that thing with the meaning or importance or beauty your heart longs to assign it. Lee Smith's stories taught me that when you look at your common life and your ordinary local place more closely, when you pay a really special type of attention, everyday, ordinary life could be magic. And you know what? I already felt that at age 13. And I know now that when you resonate with an idea or a framework about the world, it's partly because you already know it to be true on some level of your being that may yet be unexplored or forgotten. Today, what I'm realizing driving around the place where I live is that it's distinctly possible we haven't been paying enough of that special attention, or any kind of conscious attention really, of late, and that's not our fault. The online world became a laboratory, and without giving our consent, we were the mice. What I mean is that the internet, corporations using the internet to further their goals, mastered our psychology and then used it masterfully against us. Meanwhile, some of that magic that I found in the pages of stories and books and everyday local myths that caused me to really treasure the ground under my feet for that little while was neglected. But here's what I believe. I believe that the corporations failed on just one essential level. They succeeded wildly and have extracted unfettered, of course, mining our actual daily lives for profit. But they also failed because here's the good news about magic. You can ignore it and neglect it, but it will never lose its power. They mastered our psychology and we turned to notice other, more beautiful things anyway, finally. In fact, you know where I see the magic coming through loud and clear these days in the interwebs? On the very platforms they built to extract our resources from us. I see it especially on YouTube, how powerful the ordinary really can be. I'm noticing this sort of secret handshake from one regular person to the next, and this rising up of ordinary real-life interests and more worthy pursuits that connect us back to those things that maybe we almost lost when we stopped assigning meaning and beauty to them. Thankfully, the real connections were never lost. You and your baby can see the eclipse sometimes from your own backyard now as ever. Magic can never be lost, just ignored. And speaking of our own backyards, I for one never fully grasped the importance of controlling our own resources in our own local place until I started driving around the counties where I grew up after being away for decades. The contrast between then and now hits hard, and because of the long history I have here and all the little bits of information that come together in my brain from a lifetime of knowing this place, I can see the patterns. I see the little nutrient signs beside miles of acres of fields like I mentioned in my last essay. I see that something called Farmland Reserve from Utah, which turns out to be a, quote, nonprofit organization owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, owns nearly $46 million worth of raw land in my rural county here in North Carolina. And that word nonprofit is interesting because while it's a legal classification, certainly, just as certainly, there are many different types and ways of profiting off of folks. Lately, and maybe you'll see the connection, I've been availing myself of the free open courseware classes out of MIT online. They are vast storehouses of the brilliant thinking and sharing of exceptionally smart, regular people who aren't doing any wealth extraction and seem like another form of that secret handshake to me. Sometimes they consist of just a set of notes written by the professor and a list of assignments. In one of the classes that I've loved, called, quote, Myth, Ritual, and Symbolism, and created by Professor James Howe in 2004, the older the better in my opinion, I bumped into this definition of magic. He, an anthropologist, describes magic as a ritual that accomplishes something concrete. That's what casting a spell really is, right? He gives an example of a person in an ancient society whose job it would be to chant to the animals before the hunt, in order that the animals might hear and fall in love and then be drawn in closer to the hunters. It seems a bit of a brutal example, maybe, but from a time when hunting was eating and life. Even now, think of all the examples that fit that definition. Planting a seed becomes magic, as it should be. Singing a lullaby, sweeping the front porch, shaking out and laying down the freshened doormat. That definition brings to mind something my oldest son said to me recently. This past fall, he and I had driven back and forth dozens of times through the farmland to the home where I grew up, around the time that my dad passed away. After a couple of months of this, one evening as the days were getting shorter and colder, over in the passenger seat, he lifted his phone up to the window, aiming at one of the harvested fields to take a picture. Over the months, we'd seen the crops sprout and then grow up strong and dense and then be cut down. After all these trips, I realized I wanted to say thank you to the fields, my son explained. You don't usually think about how they feed us. My son was doing his own sort of magic. His picture of that field that evening was an example of something I'm wanting to focus on more and more these days, something I also ran across in one of those open MIT classes called, quote, emancipatory practices. By my own definition, it's a practice that takes us out of the framework designed by the corporation or the state and returns us to our own. And my son that evening was realizing the same thing I'm realizing now. Local resources matter, and how we manage them matters. The corporations find new ways to extract wealth from us every day, it's true. But like I said, magic can never be lost, only ignored. I see the pattern now. I finally get it. Magic is where we're from, in a sense. And it's probably been waiting a long time for people just like you and me to finally come back home. I think we're on to something.